Ba-da-ba-ba-bow. If you don't know, now you know. And please join me in saying, welcome to the most overrated, underappreciated, most viewed, underviewed podcast of all time. Welcome to the Prince of Fresh Air. I am, of course, your host, the most charismatic man in entertainment. And, I'm excited to have James Lynch back on. We had a great talk, great time last time he was on. And we got the pleasantries over with James. So let's get right to the action. We don't need a warm up here. Um, but before we get to it, because I have a lot of things I want to talk to you about that I didn't get a chance to talk to you before. Last night I got asked this question. I get asked all the time. What is the hardest and easiest part of being an actor? Because that's my profession. And so I want to ask you, James, because I don't think nobody really asks you this. What is the easiest part of your job? What is the hardest part of your job?
Easiest part. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I'd be a bad guest if I didn't at least acknowledge that you had me on here. And I'm glad I wore a different shirt today because I noticed in that intro I was wearing a different one. Wouldn't want to seem like I'm Bart Simpson and I wear the same outfit every day. So that's a plus. But easiest part of my job is that I get to work from home. The hardest part of my job is just like trying to book interviews because it's not. I'm independent, so I don't have like the luxury that other people do in this industry. Some of the other people do in this industry where, the UFC sets up all my interviews. I have to do them all on my own. So I have to work with management companies and fighters themselves. And that's how I'm able to get all the fighter interviews I do.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I would assume so. I think a lot of people, they look at the glitz and the glamour, and they see you doing the interviews, but they don't truly understand how hard it is, for that type of line of work. But the pleasantries, look, we got all through it. Let's get to the episode because I don't want to put people to sleep. That's not what this podcast is about. So, James, let's get right to the action, shall we? So, I got a couple of things I want to talk to you about. A lot of things has changed since the last time you came on, and I know you got to do your live streams, but you ruined some of the topics I have for you. But we're gonna continue on anyway, right?
We can talk whatever you want. Yeah, don't worry about what I did on my live stream this morning. That's fine. I get asked all types of stuff, and I do like an hour and a half, so there's lot to cover on there. So whatever you want to talk about, I'm game. Let's do it.
Let's jump into it. So, for people who don't know, UFC welterweight Matt the Immortal Brown, he did an interview recently, and this is actually prior to, if you don't know, Michael Chandler, who is a UFC lightweight, who's trying to get his fight with Conor McGregor off the ground rather. Michael Chandler, as we all saw, Monday Night Raw, he gets the microphone, cuts a promo, calls out Conor McGregor. But Matt Brown, before this went viral, he said something about Conor McGregor. And he said that he doesn't think Conor McGregor is coming back. And he said that, because UFC 300, everybody wanted Conor McGregor in the main event. Everybody wants to see him back. But Matt Brown says he don't think he's coming back. He's made his millions, tens to hundreds of millions. And it's not the same when you're LeBron James or Steph Curry, or Floyd Mayweather, when you can make your money doing your sport without having to worry about taking elbows and knees upside your head. It's a different, dangerous sport. And he feels like, Conor McGregor is not that young cat anymore. He's 35. He has a family. He lives on a yacht. I'm sure he wakes up on silk sheets. So he isn't coming back. So, James, let me ask you, because you get asked all the time. You think Conor McGregor makes his return in 2024?
I think he does. Yeah. I don't know what weight it'll be at. I think that they'll figure out a way to do it eventually. I just think the UFC, they don't need Conor McGregor. Like, they'll still put on events. They have to, right? They have the ESPN deal. Like, no matter what, they're going to do like the cards that they do all the time. They have to fill those cards with other fighters. But I think that, I think it would be a missed opportunity if the UFC was not able to get Conor to fight. And I think, even though it's been taking forever, I think eventually they'll figure out a way to do it. I think if, I think they'll find because I think it's money. I think that's why they have not been able to come to an agreement, because it looks like Conor's healthy. I know he makes a lot of money. I know there's no reason for him to come back, but I don't get the sense that Conor's done fighting completely. I don't think he wants to go out the way he went out, which was the broken ankle or whatever it was against Dustin Poirier in his last fight, which is a couple of years ago. I think Conor wants to come back. I think it'll be against Chandler. I just don't know when that will be, but I think eventually it will happen.
Yeah, and that's a fair take. And I want to actually, before I give my opinion on this, because like I said, Michael Chandler called out Conor McGregor on Monday Night Raw recently. He cut the promo, and a lot of people, Chael Sonnen, Michael, everybody got their take on Michael Chandler. And it seems like a lot of people say, Michael Chandler, you look like. Actually, this goes back to DC and RC because I know they were saying that he looks like he's begging for this opportunity. And Conor McGregor doesn't seem like someone who wants to fight somebody who's begging him, to fight. And they want Michael Chandler to move on. And I know you touched on this on your live stream about the reality of his situation, but just for sake of argument, what do you think Michael Chandler should do? Do you think, because he's not, my age anymore. He's in his 30s. Do you think he should continue to wait, or do you think he should just move on and just fight the up and comers?
Yes, he should wait. And kind of what I explained on my stream, and I'll explain it here, is that like, where does Michael Chandler go from here? Like, he's not going to go fight for a title. He's had too many losses in the UFC that have prevented him from getting to another title shot. Like that ship has sailed. Okay, so what's the alternative? You fight up and comers. If I'm the UFC, that's what I'm getting out of Michael. That's the other thing that people got to realize. It's like, what is the UFC getting out of Michael Chandler at this point? Like, do you want to use him to build up other fighters? Sure, but is that a better option than waiting out for potentially the biggest payday of your career? Like, Chandler could retire right now. It's not a big deal. He's had a great career. He's a Bellator champion, fought for a UFC title. Like, the fact that he even got to do that is more than most will do in their entire fight career. To me, it's worth the wait. Even if you have to wait another year or two, it doesn't matter. I know he's getting older, and I know the longer he goes, the more, it doesn't bode well for him if he does fight Conor. But I just feel like you have an opportunity to fight the most popular MMA fighter of all time in Conor McGregor. You take it. It's better than fighting some other guy, because like the thing is, like, Chandler already has built his legacy. It is what it is, right? But like, I can understand if Chandler was younger and he's wasting his prime years, or Chandler felt like he could get back in title contention. I think both of those things are done at this point. So this is sort of the last thing left he has to do in his career, and that's why I don't mind him waiting around. And all these people saying he's dropping the ball, like, what's the alternative? He fights an up and comer. He might lose. He might be on the highlight reel of an up and comer. Like, I just don't see the value there. And I think whoever Chandler fights going forward, he's going to be the more popular fighter. So it's really, he doesn't have much to gain from that other than keeping active. I say you wait out, and that's just how I view life in general. I say take your risk and see if it works out, because if it does, the upside's huge. If it doesn't, who cares? At least he tried. Chandler, like I said, the point of being in the UFC is being a world champion. That ship has sailed for Chandler. I think right now the eye is got to be on fighting Conor McGregor, and waiting as long as it needs to be waited for.
That's true. That's fair. And I think, I say this to people all the time. It's easy when you're not a name, you don't have fame, you don't have the star, star power, whatever you want to call it, that Michael Chandler has. You can't sit around. Someone like Ian Gary can't do that, because he doesn't have that name value or whatever the case may be. So actually, before we continue, I actually wanted to ask you something. Something still related, but different subject. Have you ever met a fighter that you've interviewed or you've seen on TV, and you met a person that shocked you? And I asked you that because, and I didn't get to talk about this last time. So a couple years ago, 2018, 2019, I just graduated college. I'm living on Long Island with my college buddy. I'm working. My buddy's dad at the time working at this high school. They doing dance competitions. And I was doing a little security job, a little quick paycheck. And I'm walking down the hall one Saturday. True story. I know I joke around on the podcast, but this is actually a true story. I'm walking down the hallway, and you would guess, well, you wouldn't be able to guess who came through. I'm looking, I'm like, wait, is that UFC middleweight Chris Weidman?
Right.
Now, if you ever get to meet Chris Weidman, tell him, I'm a little upset at him because I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 270 pounds. I don't look it, I work out, carry it well, but I couldn't believe how big he was. Like because this is right before he fought Renato Sosa, and he's a huge dude. Is there a fighter or fighters that you always wanted to meet, or you seen on TV and you met them, you're like, wow, this guy is actually, or this woman is a lot bigger than I think in person I thought they would be?
Usually it's the opposite, actually. Like, usually I'll see a fighter and I'm like, they look bigger on TV. Like, you forget, like, the bantamweights or featherweights, like, they're not as big as, like, you would think. Like, you just see them on TV and they look like regular size, but then when you meet them in person, they're much smaller. I'd say the only one that I think, like, was, like, really big, I saw Brock Lesnar one time when I was at UFC 200. Covering that card, because you remember after that, that's when Daniel Cormier knocked out Stipe, and they brought Brock in the cage, and literally Brock was like ahead of me, like in the line, like going to the media room, and so I got to see him in person, and he was like, holy crap! Like, I know he's big on TV, but he was probably one where I like saw in person, I was like, oh my god, this guy looks like a cartoon character.
Yeah, a funny story. I was actually I was just talking to somebody recently because I do train a little bit, and this is like last year. I was talking to somebody um who does wrestling, training wrestling. I was actually thinking about getting into that. And his family's actually friends with Brock Lesnar's family. And he was telling me, yeah, Brock is a massive dude. Like what you see on TV is what you get when you see him. And it's funny because for me acting, a lot of people don't realize, but the camera does add weight. So a lot of people are surprised when they see me. They're like, "Wait, you look a lot." I thought you was a little smaller than you were on TV.
I
I'm
get
like,
the
yeah,
same
well,
thing. Yeah.
you
Like,
know.
let me ask you this: how tall and how big do you think I am? Just looking at me right now.
See, you
And there's
can't
no
ask me
wrong
that
answers
because I'm
here. No,
cheating
no.
here.
No, no, no. Oh, whoa. So yeah, but how you cheating? I guess unless you would have seen any of my in-person interviews, but
I seen one of your live streams. I think one of your fans subscribers access. I think you said you was about 6 foot 200,
yeah, yeah,
210
yeah,
pounds
yeah,
or
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
That's right. Yeah, about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
How
yeah,
tall are
yeah.
you?
I'm 6'4".
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Now, to be fair, most of my weight comes from my hair, of course.
Right. Yeah.
It just
For
makes
sure.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
um, but let's continue. I got a couple other things I want to talk about. So I want to ask you this because Marab Dishwalashvili, and I might have botched it just a little bit,
A
but
little bit. Yeah.
Marab,
Yeah.
he's the fan reception he has gotten from last year to this year is remarkable. And he's a guy who has proved that if you interject personality into your brand, a lot of opportunities can happen, right? Because truth be told, if even though he did beat Henry Cejudo at 298, UFC 298, I don't know without his social media presence that he has now, if Dana would have said, hey, he's next for the title shot. I think with his personality, the fans are actually cheering him. Mexican fans would cheer him more than their own person, Henry Cejudo, shows that there's something there. But I want to ask you something about friendships at MMA, and as someone who's close to the action, do you think, and I mentioned Marab actually, let me back it up. I mentioned Marab because him and Aljamain Sterling, for people who don't know, he was the former UFC bantamweight champion. They train together, they're best friends. And Marab has always gotten flack from fans, from the higher ups in the UFC for being buddies with him. And we have Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez, a bunch of people who were teammates or friends in a certain division. How do you feel about teammates fighting in the same division? Do you think that at some point the friendship you kind of have to leave gems? Do you think, hey, you know what, we need more people who work out together in the same division because you have the bodies, you have someone you can you know help with a fight camp. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think there's pros and cons to it. Obviously, if you get to work with, I know that's kind of like a politically correct answer, but it really is like you have guys in the gym that help and push you. Like Sean O'Malley's going to run into this at some point if he continues to be champion because he's got a couple teammates in Mario Batista and Kyler Phillips who are in the same weight class who are continuing moving up the rankings. So that's a conversation they'll have to have. But I think it just comes down to the same thing that everyone said, which is that having those guys in the gym will help you and get you better. But when you get to that title shot, that's where things get awkward and people have to figure out the different gym situations. Remember, the famous one was Rashad Evans and John Jones years ago when they used to train together at Jackson Wink, and Rashad left to go to Florida and train over there with those guys, and John had to fight him eventually, right? So, and then we had a more recent example with Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman. Usman had to leave Kill Cliff FC and go train in Colorado for that fight. So, it's good in the sense that you have like a really good training partner that's going to push you, but it's bad in the sense that like you have to have that awkward conversation of who's going to leave the gym. So I definitely think it's a double-edged sword, but it's one that you don't really have to worry about until you get to title contention. And I always found that so annoying with the fans with Marab and Sterling, because like Sterling always said that he could move up, which he is now. He's fighting Calvin Kattar in a new weight class. So this isn't even an issue anymore, but fans were like, they have to fight right now. And it's like, no, they don't. Like there's other contenders in the weight class. And it's not like Marab, like people also made up this stuff that Marab never wanted to fight for the title of, anything else. Like I think if the UFC offered Marab the title shot, then they would have to have that conversation and figure out if it's something they want to do. But I think Marab just has a lot of respect for Aljo that he wouldn't take the shot. Marab told me in interviews years ago that he would move down. So the fact that Sterling did him a solid and moved up, I think it actually worked out better for everyone.
That's a good take. And I hate doing this, but it's the same thing. I was having a conversation with a buddy about this recently, where Because I brought him on into, my manager. I introduced him to her, but we had this conversation. It's like, if you're going to be friends in this type of industry, even though it's not fighting, acting wise, there's going to be that competition. And, when it comes to those roles and those opportunities, it might be a conflict, especially, if you're a certain skin color. I'm not getting too crazy with it, but, that's a hard conversation to have. But I applaud them too, because they stuck it through. And I know DC, he has came out, for people who don't know, Daniel Cormier, that's DC. He's, his friendship with Cain Velasquez is well documented. He had the same situation where he said, you know what, I'm gonna let Cain stay a heavyweight. I'm gonna move down to light heavyweight, and we figured it out. But I get the sense though that the UFC wasn't a huge fan of that partnering, mostly because it's holding up the title, the title contendership, and it's holding up the top of the line. Um, do you think that that was a big issue for them, or do you think that was just mostly the fans?
Well, I think it's more fans. I'm sure the UFC isn't thrilled like if two guys don't want to fight each other, but there's, like I said, like in Cormier's case, it worked out great, because think about it. If Cormier had never moved down to light heavyweight, there's no rivalry with John Jones. That's one of the biggest rivalries in MMA history.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out really well for him. And Cain Velasquez didn't stick around that long because of injuries and so many other things. So it kind of worked out well. And I think even with this Aljo and Merab situation, like I think Aljo does cut too much weight. I kind of like, to be honest, like I kind of feel like, he got knocked out by O'Malley, but I think he had a case for a rematch. And I think not enough people talked about that. It's like they're moving on. Aljo had years of title defenses, whether you thought they were good wins or not, that's irrelevant. He had a number of title defenses. He got knocked out, but to me, that's got those years of service being a champion should count for something. So I'm a little bit surprised that more fans were not ready to see Aljo have that rematch with Sean O'Malley. I'm totally fine with that. But again, like I think Aljo's up at 145. I think he's staying there. He doesn't have to cut as much weight. It kind of worked out for the best there. But yeah, the UFC does not like it when teammates will not fight each other. And I think like that's something that, has been problematic for them in the past, but they've seemed to sort of navigate around it,
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you about another recent blow up in the media, and it involves the media darling, as we all know, Sean Strickland, former UFC middleweight champion. Sean Strickland has voiced his opinions on influencers. Um, and he did a recent sparring match with UFC, not UFC, but influencer Sneeko. He's not the only fighter. Deontay Wilder has had his runs in with sparring fighters, sparring fans, or whatever the case may be. A lot of fighters, or some fighters, typically will do that, and obviously they have them sign waivers and record and all that stuff. But Sean Strickland did catch, excuse me, some backlash for beating up Sneeko. Now I watched the whole thing, and it wasn't as bad as the clips made it seem like. It was an actual 5 minutes. He let him do his thing for almost the whole entire round, and then he unleashed. But what do you, as an MMA journalist, because a lot of journalists, they cover this sport, this topic. How do you feel about fighters doing that? Like, are you a fan? You like stay away from it, or how do you feel about that?
How do I feel about like influencers, like or people sparring fighters? I think you take it at your own risk. You shouldn't just. And here's the thing: like I didn't have an issue with the Strickland thing, because it's like what you're getting with Sean Strickland. He's not a normal person in terms of like okay, there's a couple of things I think get missed in the whole thing with Sneeko, because I follow both. Like I do follow Sneeko's stuff too a little bit, and obviously I know Sean Strickland really well. I knew Sean even before he blew up, so I've known like what type of guy he is. He's not like your typical fighter, right? Like he's very like like I was hearing stories about him sparring guys, that weren't like professionally trained for years. So it's like it's nothing sort of new there. But here's the thing: I look at it as like buying a pack of cigarettes. What does it say on the label of the cigarettes? It says may cause cancer. So if you get cancer after smoking a pack of cigarettes or keep smoking for years, you really have yourself to blame. That's what Sean Strickland is. If you're gonna go spar with Sean Strickland, he's not gonna take it easy on you. He's not a typical fighter. Like, and then to make matters worse, like it's not like some guy off the street. Like Strickland does not like influencers. And I know Sneeko was sort of debating that on his channel, like I'm not an influencer, I'm not on YouTube, all this stuff. Well, you're a guy that makes content, and Strickland doesn't like that in general, because he feels like kids are looking up to people who have kind of like, I don't know, made their living doing like just like basically making content. Like Strickland's just not a fan of the way that like people are looking up to like YouTube influencers instead of looking up to like other people, I guess. So you already know. So you've got like this sort of this perfect storm in a bad way of like Sean Strickland doesn't like influencers. Sean Strickland's not going to. So you already know going in that Strickland doesn't like an influencer. Sean Strickland has been known for not going easy on people in sparring. And then you've got this guy in Sneeko who I'm sure in his head, like he just didn't do his research or whatever it was, but he's going in thinking like, I'm going to look cool by sparring Sean Strickland. But in Strickland's mind, he's like, I'm going to teach this guy a lesson. So it's like people who are outraged about it. It's like Strickland's done this before. Like this isn't anything new. Now, is it right? No, he should not be trying to hurt someone. Like fighters to a certain degree are like people who own firearms. Like, like it's a weapon, what he possesses to be able to hurt someone. He does it for a living. That's his entire thing. It's like, it's something that like in the back of his head, he could kill someone. He really could. Right. So I feel like, Sneeko should have done better research with that. It's not worth the squeeze. I've always had people every now and then like, would you ever spar Sean Strickland? No. Why would I take brain damage? It's not worth any view or anything to do that. You know that Strickland's not like a normal person in that regard, then that he's not going to go easy. And so I think like the outrage is a bit like, it's like you didn't do your homework. Like I don't understand why there's such a big outrage. Like people have their right to be mad at Strickland for going hard on him, but people also should realize that like this is who Sean Strickland is and you're not going to change him.
Right. And it's funny you say that because I know Derek Lewis a couple years ago, he got in that same situation where a fan kept harassing him. I'm going to show up to the gym. I'm going to fight you. I know Kevin Holland's talking about the same thing. And hey, if you want to come in here, step in the octagon or ring with me, this is what you want. I'll give it to you. But there is an obsession with fans asking that. And I know there was a viral video years ago with John Jones. I think a fan asked him to choke him. And,
which is stupid.
Some people don't like it.
Well, no, you don't know how dangerous it is. Like you choke someone out, you're going unconscious. Like that's like if something goes wrong, what happens if he kills someone? Seriously, like that's not a smart, like I don't know why we live in this generation. Well, I know why, because everyone wants attention, but it's like, I don't understand why people are so like addicted to clout. That's all this is clout. It's like, man, I got choked out by John Jones. Like, yeah, that's not like, that doesn't make you any better of a person. It makes you look stupid.
Right. Hey, I don't judge. Everybody got their thing, everybody got their kinks.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about a couple more things. I know you got to run soon. UFC Apex. I know Jack Hermanson recently, UFC middleweight Jack Hermanson recently won against Joe Pyfer, but he's not the only one. There's been a couple fighters and a lot of fans complaining about the UFC Apex. You know what? I don't want to do that. I'm gonna scratch that. I want to ask you about something that just happened. UFC 298.
Sure.
Because this bothered me. Now, I know commentators, UFC, people who work the events, they're going to have biases. I think it's unreasonable for me to say you shouldn't have biases. But what is blatant, and I love Joe Rogan, this is an experience I didn't want to experience. But Joe Rogan was being very biased to Ian Gary. And he's not the only one. There's a lot of commentators and people who are covering the sport who are biased, and which is fine. I'm not a fan of blatant bias, especially in the middle of a UFC pay-per-view or UFC fight night. And a lot of fans called them out about it. I know some media called them out, but a lot of people didn't like it. And I don't like it not because it's biased, but it's more so if I'm not a hardcore fan and I'm watching this fight, I'm listening to Joe Rogan, who's bigger outside of MMA anyway, and you're like, "Oh, Joe Rogan said this. Okay, so he must be right." And I think it skews the way how people view fights. How do you feel about blatant favoritism, or whatever the case may be, when it comes to calling fights or anything involving a fight game?
Yeah, I don't like it either. And I felt the exact same way watching that fight. I know Jeff Neal quite well. I've interviewed him for a long time, and I thought that Jeff was doing things that they weren't calling. And now listen, so I don't know if it's Rogan personally like trying to hype Gary up, or if there's people in the truck. Because remember, he's got producers being like, hey, maybe mention that Gary's doing a good job. Because UFC's trying to build Gary up. I mean, that's why they made the fight. He's undefeated. They're trying to make him like the next Conor McGregor. So if you can enhance that. And I also felt he was the same way with Mackenzie Dern in the fight with Amanda Lemos. Like Mackenzie Dern's getting her face beaten in, and they're talking about her submission submission threat on the ground instead of talking about the fact that she's losing the fight. So I don't like that either. I think DC has a bad habit of doing that when his teammates are fighting. I don't really like that either. Because he trains in American Kickboxing Academy, and guys like Islam and Habib, like when he's talking about them, he's not, he's sort of overdoing it a bit. It's hard not to be biased, I suppose, if you know someone on a personal level. But I agree with you. It's a bad look because like I even have people this week being like, that was such a great fight with Ian Gary, and I was like, it really wasn't. It wasn't that good of a matchup. Like Gary, I thought missed a lot of opportunities to do some things and take some risks in that fight, and I felt like he was point fighting a lot and not and trying to avoid Jeff's shots as opposed to actually fighting. And I think part of that is the commentary. So I'm not a fan of it either.
Yeah, like I said, this is no way in shape or form calling out anybody. I just, as a fan and as someone who looks at it from a hardcore fan, but look at it from a casual fan, the bias calling is just egregious, and it just ruins the fight. And it's funny, so it was a fighter who mentioned this, but apparently the judge is sitting next to them. So if a judge is so happens not paying attention and he hears the blatant, Ian Gary kicked him in the head, or Ian Gary's footwork is so much better, I think it takes the fight. But as we wrap up, James, because I know you got to run soon, I want to have a little fun in the last couple minutes. I want to do some rapid fire what ifs, right?
Sure.
So I want to ask you, James, in the history of UFC, we had our famous trash talkers, Chael Sonnen, Conor McGregor, obviously, Michael Bisping, even Rampage Jackson. Who is your favorite trash talker?
You know what? And this is going to be kind of like, we're talking about like recency bias and stuff like that. I think Sean Strickland is probably my favorite trash talker because it's all honest. Like it's all very, like from the hip, I'll never forget because I was at UFC 290, what was the card with Adesanya and Cannonier? It was two Julys ago. I'm going to find the card right now. I think it was 276, I think it was. Yeah, UFC 276. So if you remember that press conference, Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland were not fighting each other, and it was Sean Strickland and Alex Pereira. It was before Pereira came champ, and Izzy was fighting Jared Cannonier. And Strickland went after Adesanya and started making fun of him for watching anime and all that. And it was just so funny because like it was just so unexpected. And the way he was delivering his lines, like the way he was sort of saying it was really incredible. I thought that I have not seen a fighter who has like done such good trash talk like from the hip. Like Chael Sonnen, he comes pretty close as well. He's had some really great lines over the years, and he was sort of the first one to like really boost his career up with trash talk. I think Chael will probably go down as the best one ever, but I think right now it's Sean Strickland for me. Like he is so good at getting in his opponent's heads and talking smack. I really enjoy it. I just think he's really funny personally.
Yeah, I gotta go with Chael Sonnen. I know Conor McGregor is like the easy choice, but Chael Sonnen for me. Another one.
Yeah,
we're gonna do a rapid one. So, sure. What ifs? So, John Jones versus Israel Adesanya. For people who don't know, that was a huge rivalry from 2019 to maybe early 2021. If they fought, not right now because obviously John Jones is a little more older. He's out with an injury, but back then. John Jones versus Israel Adesanya. Who do you think would have won that fight?
I think we already saw what was going to happen. He was going to lose. Adesanya was going to lose. He fought Jan Blachowicz at 205, and Jan just kept taking him down. And John's a huge light heavyweight. He's got the height and reach, and John would have absolutely won that fight. I'm very confident about that.
Okay. How about this? Because this one I actually think about, and I'm a John Jones fan. Yeah. John Jones versus Francis Ngannou.
Francis, no questions. And here's why, because I just think Francis is so much more like I'm a firm believer, and you could ask me like a number of fights, and most of the time I will take the guy that's the mainstay in the weight class. John has one win at light heavyweight. It was a great, or at heavyweight, it was a great win. It was the win that got him the title over Cyril Gane. I'll give him that. But Francis is pretty well rounded, and Francis's last fight in MMA and the UFC, the fight against Stipe. I mean, Stipe is one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. A guy that had already defeated Francis. He made him look like an amateur. He went out there and destroyed him. And I think with Francis had, he had one bad fight against Derek Lewis, and then he had a close fight with Cyril Gane. But I just think that Francis, like John's never been hit by a heavyweight like Francis Ngannou before, and I don't know if he could take that punch. So for that alone, I would take Francis in that fight.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I always said John Jones, but that power, everybody he's touched got put down. Thank you, James. I know you got to run, so I won't keep you. where can people find you again? Because I know even on your live streams, people always ask you, "Oh, where do I find the MMA pros picks?" Or where can I watch your live streams or whatever? Where can people find you?
Everything's Lynch on Sports. YouTube.com/Lynch on Sports. I have playlists in there if you're looking for any of the content. It's all clearly labeled, so it should be easy to find. Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, all Lynch on Sports. Super easy to do. Thanks so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Oh wait, James, before you go, what about the Patreon? You gotta throw that in there too.
Patreon.com/Lynch on Sports. Same thing. That's where you get the extra content. You can get access to the Discord chat. It's just like a little bit of extra stuff. If you're really into my content, you can check me out there.
Absolutely. I'm the Prince of Fresh Air, the most charismatic man. That's James Lynch. Thank you, James. We'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.